The first lie she ever told tasted of dust and desperation. It caught in Alara Vance's throat as she slipped from her bedroom window, her silk dress tearing on a rosebush her mother had planted. Below, the Arizona night swallowed everything, leaving only the sound of wind howling through the red rock canyons like a mournful cry. Left behind was the opulent house, the death sentence of a marriage to Silas Croft, a man with eyes as cold as winter and hands that knew only how to take. Her father, a man blinded by greed, had sold her for the rights to a silver mine. To him, Alara was not a daughter but currency. To Silas, she was a prize, a beautiful possession to be displayed. That thought was more terrifying than the endless desert stretching before her. So she ran. Her journey began with the fury of the heavens. Clouds gathered like an army, and a torrential downpour turned the dry arroyos into raging rivers of mud. Her horse spooked, throwing her into the frigid floodwaters. Swept away, battered against rocks, Alara thought it was the end. She would rather drown in the mud than be touched by Silas Croft's hand. Just as consciousness began to fade, a strong arm seized her, pulling her from the torrent. The man appeared from the rain like a phantom. He was tall, silent, his face carved with the harsh lines of the desert itself. His name was Caleb Ryder, but most just called him Cal. He didn't ask questions. He simply wrapped her in his sheepskin cloak and led her to a sheltered rock overhang. His silence was both unnerving and strangely comforting. Alara, so accustomed to cruel words and harsh demands, was disoriented by his calm. She didn't trust him. But the warmth of the fire he built and the gentleness with which he examined her bruises planted a seed of doubt in her deep-rooted fear. "You can't go back," Cal said, his voice low and rough like stones rolling over stones. "They'll be looking everywhere. They?" she asked, her voice trembling, though she already knew the answer. "Silas Croft's men. He's put a bounty on your head. Every man in prosperity wants that gold. They set out at dawn." Cal led her through trails known only to mountain goats, their tracks erased by the wind. But Croft's men were more relentless than nature. 3 days later, they found them. They appeared on a canyon ridge, dark silhouettes against the fiery sunset. The first shot cracked through the silence, a bullet striking the rock beside Alara's head and spraying her with stone chips. Cal didn't flinch. He pushed her down behind a large boulder, his Colt revolver already in his hand. He moved not with haste, but with a cold, calculated economy of motion that was lethally efficient. Each shot he fired had a purpose. The sharp, clean report of his pistol was an answer to the chaotic barrage of his enemies. Hiding behind the rock, Alara witnessed a dance of violence. Cal moved between the crags, reloading with a terrifying calm. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled her nostrils. She saw one man fall from his horse, then another. Finally, the remaining riders retreated. When silence returned, Cal turned to her, his gray eyes showing no victory, only a deep weariness. He had saved her, but he had also exposed her to his violent world. The days that followed were a lesson in survival. Cal taught her how to find water in a cactus, how to read tracks in the sand, how to start a fire with nothing but flint and steel. He was patient, a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He respected her, he never touched her unnecessarily, and when he did, like when he dressed her blistered, bleeding feet, his calloused fingers were impossibly gentle. One night, as they sat by the fire, Alara saw him turning an old silver locket over in his hands. "My wife," he said quietly, answering her unspoken question. "Her name was Sarah. Raiders hit our ranch. I wasn't there to protect her." The pain in his eyes was as deep as the desert sky. Suddenly, Alara understood. His protection wasn't about control. It was a form of penance, a silent vow that he would never let that tragedy happen again. That night, she told him of her own fears, of the long nights locked in her room, of feeling invisible in her own home. Cal simply listened, his presence a validation, a comfort she had never known. Their bond was tested when danger came from an unexpected source. A rattlesnake hidden beneath a rock struck Alara's calf as she gathered firewood. The pain was sharp and immediate, and the venom spread quickly. Cal's reaction was instant. He cut the wound and sucked out the poison with his own mouth, an act both intimate and reckless. A fever took hold, and Alara drifted in and out of consciousness in his arms. She felt the cool poultice of herbs he placed on the wound, heard his low voice murmuring to her through the nightmares. When she finally awoke, the sun was high and her head was resting on his lap. For the first time in her life, she felt completely safe with a man. Trust was no longer an abstract concept. It was forged in his acts of sacrifice. But Silas Croft was not a man who gave up easily. He used not only violence, but cunning. He knew Cal had old acquaintances, men who lived on the edge of the law. He found one of them, a man named Jed, and made him an offer he couldn't refuse: water. The rights to the only river in the territory, a prize more valuable than gold. Jed betrayed them. He gave Croft's men their location, leading them into a box canyon, a natural death trap. When Alara and Cal realized they were surrounded, every escape route blocked, hope seemed lost. "They want you alive," Cal said, checking his last few cartridges, "but they won't hesitate to kill me." In that moment, Alara was no longer the frightened girl who had fled her wedding. The days in the desert, Cal's tutelage, and the trust he had placed in her had forged someone new. When one of Croft's mercenaries scaled a rock face behind Cal, readying a final shot, Alara didn't hesitate. She grabbed Cal's hunting knife, lunged forward, and plunged it into the man's leg. His scream alerted the others, creating a precious moment of chaos. In the firefight that followed, Alara fought beside Cal. She reloaded his guns, pointed out enemy positions, and even took his rifle, firing with hands that trembled but held true. She saved his life. That moment changed everything. They were no longer protector and protected. They were partners. They escaped the trap by a hair's breadth, thanks to the sudden arrival of Cal's true friends, a secluded community from a hidden valley who considered him a brother. They had heard of Jed's betrayal and had come to their aid. The battle that followed was fierce, and it came at a cost. One of Cal's closest friends fell. Facing the loss together, Alara and Cal found solace in each other's arms. Shared grief bound them in a way joy never could. As the dust settled, Alara knew she had a choice. Cal took her to his community, a place where people were equals, where women hunted and fought alongside men. He told her she could stay, or he would help her get to a new city to start a new life. "Here, you will have to work," he said, "but you will be free." Looking at the strong women around her, looking at the respect in Cal's eyes, Alara realized she was done running. She was no longer running from something. She was running towards something. She was running towards a life of her own making. She chose to stay. She learned to tan hides, to ride like a warrior, to live in harmony with the harsh but generous land. She found a family, a purpose, and she realized she loved Cal. This love was nothing like the books had taught her. It wasn't about possession or duty. It was built on respect, on sacrifice, and on a trust forged in fire. But the past was not yet done with them. Silas Croft, obsessed by his failure and humiliation, gathered a larger force, determined to burn the valley to the ground and take back what he considered his. This time there would be no retreat. The final battle took place at the foot of the Red Cliffs. It was a clash of two worlds, the world of greed and control against the world of freedom and community. Alara came face to face with her father and Silas. "I am your father," her father roared, his face twisted in rage. "No," Alara replied, her voice steady. "You are just the man who sold his daughter. I'm not afraid of you anymore." She turned to Silas, her rifle held firmly. "And I am not your property." In the end, it was Alara who saved the valley. Silas had cornered Cal, but he had fatally underestimated the girl he once dismissed. With the skill Cal had taught her, Alara fired a single, precise shot that sent Silas's pistol flying from his hand, ending the fight. Defeated and disgraced, Silas and his remaining men were driven from the territory for good. When peace finally returned, Cal led Alara to a ridge overlooking the entire valley. In the fading light of sunset, he knelt on one knee. He didn't offer a diamond ring, but a simple bracelet braided from the leather of his own horse's reins. "Alara Vance," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I can't promise you an easy life, but I promise to always respect you, to fight beside you, and to love you with everything I am. Will you build a life with me here?" She said yes. Their wedding was simple, witnessed by the people who had become her family. She wore a dress of doe skin, and their vows were exchanged under a vast canopy of stars. Years later, watching her children play on the land she and Cal had cultivated, together, Ilara often thought of the girl who had climbed out of that window. That girl had been running from fear, but the woman she had become, loved, respected, and utterly free, had chosen to stay. She had found her home not in a place, but in a choice, and in the arms of the man who had shown her that true love is not a cage, but a pair of wings.